welcome to the December the 12th, 1989 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you history of Grand Prairie, Texas, and also some of the important people that are continuing to make history in our city. This is our history tape number 109, and we are very honored today to have a very important businessman in our community that has meant a lot to Grand Prairie, Texas, Mr. J.W. Bud Porter. Welcome, Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Ruthie. It's nice to be here.
We're just so delighted to have you on the set today to help you and you to help us recreate some of the past about the Gifford Hill Company Consortium, and we want to talk with you particularly about Gifford Hill American, with which you're associated today. Would you look out into your camera and establish some genealogy for us, because it was your father that was very instrumental and very important in helping to bring Gifford Hill to Grand Prairie, Texas. Would you do that for us at this time? Tell us about your genealogy.
All right. Well, my father, J.W. Porter, I'm J.W. Porter Jr., and my father was called Deke, and he grew up in Terrell, Texas, and he was the son of a farmer and a banker and a businessman in Terrell. My father went to Texas A&M University, and he graduated with a degree in civil engineering, and he went to work for a consulting engineering firm in 1923, and from there he went to Harvard University and got a master's degree in sanitation engineering. Came back to Texas and married my mother, one of his childhood sweethearts. Her name was Eileen Kryling. My mother's still alive. She'll have her 90th birthday on the 23rd of December.
Oh, wonderful.
And so they got married in 1924, and he went to work for a consulting firm in San Antonio called Terrell Bartlett Engineers. Worked for Mr. Bartlett for a while, and then he joined the Portland Cement Association, promoting and developing a market for concrete pipe in Texas. About 1927, a company in California, American Concrete Pipe Company, opened a business in Dallas, and they brought down a fellow named Ray Foley from Detroit, Michigan, to run this business. And my father went to work for American Concrete Pipe Company as Mr. Foley's engineer. And in 1929, when the Depression hit, American Concrete Pipe Company fell on hard times. Mr. Foley left and became the general manager of the Trinity Levee and Improvement District, and my dad went to work for the city of Dallas. And he stayed with the city of Dallas for a couple of years, and then a fellow named Harry Tellier came to town. Mr. Tellier had been an itinerant pipe manufacturer. He was from California. Mr. Tellier would go from one city to another and promote and develop a market for concrete pipe. And he had been successful in various small towns in West Texas. So he came and approached my dad on joining him and going into the concrete pipe business. And so Harry Tellier and my dad approached Gifford Hill and Company. Gifford Hill and Company being in the sand and gravel business and the ready-mix business in the Dallas area, and they were interested in going into the concrete pipe business. And so they created a company in 1931 at that time called Penniman Concrete Pipe Company. And there were two men named Penniman who were active in this business, and the two Pennimans fell on financial hard times and they left. And so my dad and Harry Tellier and Gifford Hill and Company, Mr. Pete Gifford Sr. and Mr. Perch Hill, became the main driving force behind Gifford Hill Pipe Company. And Gifford Hill Pipe Company continued on for, I guess it was not until 1946 that they went into the concrete pressure pipe business along with American Pipe and Construction Company, which was the successor company to the American Pipe Company that my dad had worked for. So that kind of gets you into the way Gifford Hill American got organized, and then the activities of Gifford Hill Pipe Company.
When the people of Grand Prairie, Texas think of Gifford Hill and the pipe company and Gifford Hill American, they think of probably only the pipe plant that you have down on Myers Road, which is just north of Interstate 30. And that's not the whole picture, though, these days. But when you first began the pipe company, where was its first inception?
Well, Gifford Hill Pipe Company's first plant was where the current Gifford Hill Pipe Company is located, just adjacent to Interstate 30 on Myers Road. And then when Gifford Hill American was organized, their first job was up in Wichita Falls, Texas. And when they came from Wichita Falls, they moved that plant from Wichita Falls back to Grand Prairie, and it was established immediately north and adjacent to Gifford Hill Pipe Company.
All right, now we have some wonderful photographs that we need to show and tell, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about Gifford Hill. But first of all, let's start with your dad. He was such an important man. Why don't you take his photograph and let's show and tell it, first of all, because we'd like to get him established on our historical record here, and you've told us a little bit about his history and that he came from Terrell, Texas, and went to A&M, so when he became an Aggie, that sanctified him almost all the way. As far as engineering is concerned, that really did do it. And then that is such an important picture that we wanted to get on our camera. Have we picked that one up? Oh, that is very, very good. Wonderful. That is a good photograph of him. And also, while we're showing and telling, if you would close that one, and let's show a picture of your parents.
Okay.
Because we need to get your mommy in here, because we know that she had held up his hands a lot when he was beginning as a civil engineer. And we'd also like, while we're showing the picture of your parents, do you have any brothers or sisters you'd like to name?
Well, I have a sister, an older sister, and her name is Phyllis, and she's married to a man named Jack Jones in Dallas. They have 3 children and 2 grandchildren.
All right. And you, Bud, would you like to name your family, your wife and children or whatever? Because we don't want to miss any licks on this or we'd be in bad trouble.
I would be in bad trouble.
Yes, you would.
I have a wife. Her name is Patsy, and she was a native Dallasite. And I went to Texas A&M and studied civil engineering.
All right.
And when I got out of Texas A&M, I joined the Army and went to the Korean War for 2 years. And when I came back, I went back to the Harvard Business School. And Patsy was a student at Wellesley, and my mother suggested that I might look her up. She was the daughter of the sister of a good friend of mine. And when I left to go off to the Army, well, she was just a little girl, and when I came back, she'd grown up.
To be a beautiful young lady.
And so I looked her up. She was a student at Wellesley, and we subsequently fell in love and got married. And we had 3 children. I have a daughter, Mary, who's 29, and a son, Jimmy, who is 27, and a son, Bill, who's 24.
Right.
So my children are grown, but I have no grandchildren.
No grandchildren yet. Okay, we'll work on that one later down into the generation, right? Well, your dad, when they started out the plant, with Mr. Hill and Mr. Gifford, that's the part that those in Grand Prairie remember probably the best of all. And you have some photographs of Gifford Hill when things were going on down there before you became automated completely. Would you like to show and tell us what's going on at the old Gifford Hill plant?
Well, this is a photograph of a group of men at the Gifford Hill plant at the Mountain Creek plant. And they were, I think these photographs were shown to demonstrate the labor-intense activities in the manufacture of concrete pipe. And this was probably during World War II or after the end of World War II. And you see this is the way they actually got the pipe out of the plant. They tilted it over, and they just simply rolled it out by manpower.
Manhandled it.
Manhandled it. To tilt it over, they would use a pinch bar and get about 5 strong backs behind that piece of pipe, and they'd tilt that piece of pipe over probably on top of an old tire. And then they would roll that piece of pipe out into the yard.
You didn't have all of the good helps that you have today.
No forklift trucks or things of that nature. Then this is how they developed to get that pipe out also back in 1949 or 46, 47. And you can see that they began to use some machinery and equipment to get the pipe tilted over, and then they would pick it up and carry it out with the assistance of a truck.
Were you using the trains, the locomotives at that time when you were doing this in the 1940s? Were you still using your railroad spur and the trains? I know that during one of the great floods, we saw some of the train locomotives that were flooded so badly that they were over on their sides and all of this and some past research?
The sand and gravel would have been brought in by rail, and steel would have been brought in by rail, but the pipe was never shipped out on rail. It was always shipped out by truck.
By truck. Okay. And when they loaded these trucks back before you had the forklifts and the winches and all of that kind of stuff to get them up, were they loaded by hand and rolled up on the trucks? Or
they used a truck with what they called a gin pole, or an A-frame with a cable, and they'd put a hook in it and they'd raise it up with the cable and pick it up and set it on the truck.
Okay.
So,
we have some pictures of your dad and some of the wonderful people that work with him, and I'd like for you to get some of those photographs up and name those people if you would, because I believe that there are many people living in Grand Prairie, Texas that work for Gifford Hill. Many of those that have retired work there. And would you like to
why don't we
begin?
start with this one?
All right, let's start
Because
with
this is really the birth of Gifford Hill American, or that's what it's titled, is the birth of Gifford Hill American on the back.
All right.
And in 1946, Gifford Hill American did a job at Wichita Falls. This was a joint venture between Gifford Hill Pipe Company and American Pipe and Construction Company. And interestingly enough, American Pipe and Construction Company had the patent rights to a method of joining concrete pipe called the tricky joint. And the tricky joint was not because it was a trick, but it was named after the man that got the patent, Mr. Bill Tricky.
I see.
And so American Pipe and Construction Company had the right to this steel and rubber gasket joint, and Gifford Hill Pipe Company had the connections and the crew, the people to put on a job making this pipe. And so they joint ventured a major water supply line for the city of Wichita Falls called the Kickapoo Pipeline. And this is a photograph of the signing of that contract. And this is Fred Jenkins, who was with American Pipe and Construction Company. And this is Bob Edwards, also with American Pipe. And this is Ray Foley, who represented Gifford Hill Pipe Company in this venture. And this is Perch Hill. And those four men were present at the birth of Gifford Hill American in Wichita Falls back in 1946.
That is wonderful.
This is a photograph of some of the same people. Of course, this is Ray Foley, and this is Joe Clardy. Joe's still alive and living in Dallas. He's retired as financial vice president of Gifford Hill American. And this is my dad, and this is Bob Edwards. And this photograph was taken at a major water supply project, the Canadian River Project up in Amarillo, probably about 1963 or 1964.
Okay.
So,
And our next important photograph, I think this one looks good. I think that is probably one of the most historical ones that you have there, isn't it, other than the birth of Gifford Hill American?
well, this is a photograph of, I guess you might say, the business leadership of Gifford Hill and Company, which comprised not only Gifford Hill Pipe Company, but also Gifford Hill Sand and Gravel, Dallas Concrete, and various other businesses that Gifford Hill and Company had. This is the only photograph I have that has Mr. P.W. Gifford Sr. He was called Papa Pete, and this is Mr. P.W. Gifford Sr. right here. And then Mr. Perch Hill is here. And this is my dad over here on the far left. And let's see, who else can I identify? This is Robert E. Wynn here. Mr. Wynn was the Vice President of Finance for Gifford Hill and Company, and Mr. Wynn is still alive and living in Dallas. This is Murray Saunders. Murray was one of the executives for Gifford Hill and Company. His main function was purchasing and things of that nature. This is Harold Lacey. And Harold is still alive and living in Colorado with his son. And this is Fred Gifford. This is Mr. Gifford's brother. And Mr. Fred Gifford lived in Grand Prairie for many years and was active in the Gifford Hill organization. And one of these men is Howard Wilson. I think this is Mr. Wilson. And Gifford Hill and Company was organized when Hill, Wilson, and Watson, they were road contractors, merged with Gifford and Links Construction Company. And Mr. Wilson was Wilson of Hill, Wilson, and Watson. And that photograph was probably taken around 1934 or 1935.
That is a historical photograph. Okay, how about one or two of these others? We'd like to get those on our tape also.
Okay. Well, let's see if there's a date on this. 1960. In 1960, the Gifford Hill Pipe Companies instigated what they call service pin awards. And they presented service pin to all their long service employees. And this was the service pin that was a facsimile of the service pin here. And this is a photograph of Ed Powell, who was one of my father's first assistants, right-hand man. And then this is my dad. And this is Ott Boyd. Ott Boyd lived in Grand Prairie for many years and was the plant superintendent at the Grand Prairie plant. And then this is Pete Gifford, Jr. And Pete still lives in Dallas and is very active in business affairs in Dallas. So that was back in 1960.
All right, now we need to look at this very special photograph.
All right. The American Concrete Pipe Association, and I guess this must have been back around 1963 or 4, they recognized Ray Foley and made him an honorary director. And my father had the privilege of presenting this plaque to Ray Foley and recognizing his many years of leadership and contributions to the American Concrete Pipe Association. So.
All right, well, we have one small photograph that if our cameraman can pick this one up, this is going to be an ingenious thing, but we really need to show that, don't we? Let's show and tell that one.
This is the only photograph I have of Harry Tellier. And Harry was, like I said, he was an itinerant concrete pipe manufacturer. He was a hard worker, and he and my dad made a good team. And they started Gifford Hill Pipe Company with the financial help of Gifford Hill and Company. Harry, the business expanded to New Mexico just before World War II. And at that time, Harry and Gifford and Hills and my dad, they decided to part company with Harry. And so he took the concrete pipe plant in New Mexico as his equity interest in Gifford Hill and Gifford Hill Pipe Company. And he built a substantial business in New Mexico and Albuquerque and also in, I think, maybe in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And he was a health nut. He was always exercising and watching what he ate, and a real interesting type of a person. And his son is still a businessman in New Mexico, although I have no contacts with his son. His son was called Partner. He had two sons. The younger son was called Old Timer. So that kind of gives you a little insight into the personality of Harry Tellier. So.
That is wonderful. Now, before we end our interview about your dad, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about his philanthropic activities, and we want to end that, but we're not complete with our interview with you.
Okay.
But we'd like for you to show and tell a little bit about some of the things that he has done after his retirement and while he was still had his finger in the pie with Gifford Hill America.
All right. Well, my dad was always very active in the Christian church. He was an elder at East Dallas Christian Church. And one of my classmates at A&M, a man named Alan Eubank, was a student at Texas A&M with me. And Alan studied petroleum and geological engineering and decided to become a missionary. Went to TCU and studied at theology school and with TCU, I think, the Bright College, and then became a missionary. My father was interested in Alan and wanted to help him in his missionary work. Alan went to Thailand, and my father made extra monies available to him. And so after my father's death, Alan arranged to have this chapel built in Samyak, Thailand, and it was built in memory of my dad. So, and my wife and I have been over to see that on one occasion since then. So.
Well, that was a wonderful memorial,
Yes, it
wasn't
was a wonderful memorial, and Alan and his wife are still active in the missionary effort in Thailand, and we get to see Alan and Joan periodically. I visited them in Thailand. So,
Well, your father had a most interesting life, beginning in Terrell, Texas, and all the way through all of the avenues that he traveled. Was he sort of an inspiration to you and a role model for you? We'd like to talk about you for a little bit.
all right. Well, yes, very much a role model, and he was a good father. Took a lot of interest in his children. Wanted to see that we were raised in a good Christian home, and my mother certainly provided a good Christian home. My father traveled a lot in his business, but he was there when he needed to be. So, yes, he was very much a role model. He was a civil engineer, and I was, I guess, inspired to study civil engineering at Texas A&M. And although he studied sanitation engineering at Harvard, I went to the Harvard Business School and studied business administration, got a master's in business administration.
And of course, that's led you on an avenue, and now you are the president of Gifford Hill American.
That's correct.
Here in Grand Prairie, Texas. Okay, tell us a little bit what it's like to be the president of a corporation that is so long-standing, that does such a wonderful service for so many people.
Well, you know, I guess I'd have to say it's a real honor to be president of a company of this type. And the people that come together to make this company, you know, we have a lot of expensive machinery that we have to depreciate, but the machinery is the machinery is secondary to the people that go together to make up Gifford Hill American. We have 4 plants. Our flagship plant is here at Grand Prairie. Every product we make is made at Grand Prairie. And then we have 3 satellite plants. One out in Lubbock, which makes only small diameter pipe and only pre-tensioned pipe. And then a plant in Victoria that makes both pre-tensioned and pre-stressed pipe, but also only small diameter. And then a plant in Houston that makes only large diameter pre-stressed pipe. So that's kind of our manufacturing operations. But it's exciting. It's an interesting business. We feel like we fulfill a very critical need in our society and our culture, and that we furnish a method of transporting drinking water. And we all have to have some drinking water. So,
If you would have a message for any of the young people that might research our history tape, tell us where you were born, and first of all, where were you born and raised?
well, I was born in Dallas.
All right.
Went to school in Dallas.
And your school?
I went to, well, my grade school was Vickery.
Good.
And later they changed the name to James B. Bottom
All right.
Grade School. And then I went on to, my parents moved out into University Park, and I went to University Park Grade School, and then to Highland Park Junior High, and Highland Park High School, and then from there to Texas A&M University.
Texas A&M. All right. What kind of advice would you give to, say, a young man or a young lady that might want to be a civil engineer today? Do you think the field is wide open?
Oh my, yes. I think civil engineering has to be one of the most exciting fields of engineering today. There's so many things that civil engineers can do, not just in water transportation and water supply, but also in highway work. These are things that just about everybody is aware of: highways and streets and roads and bridges and such, and structures for buildings. But you know, when you get right down to one of the more critical aspects of our society is the abatement of pollution. And if you drive out into the Trinity Bottoms, you'll see some landfills that are just going up almost astronomically high. And that can't continue. Somebody has to deal with all of our solid waste that we generate. And that's an aspect of civil engineering. And cleaning up the environment, treating of wastewater. Then we are all aware of the superconducting super collider that's being planned for down at Waxahachie. and that will have a lot of aspects of civil engineering involved in that. So I think civil engineering is really an exciting field right now. Oceanography is a part of civil engineering, and we've just begun to tap the resources of the ocean. It's been my privilege to be on the advisory council for the School of Civil Engineering at Texas A&M, so I'm a great supporter of civil engineering.
I asked you the absolute correct question then,
Yes.
and I know that balancing that off with a business management is just one of the things that was the icing on the cake for you, because now you know the civil engineering and the other part. We have about 2 minutes left, and in those 2 minutes I'd like for you to look out and encourage any young person that might be listening as to your short philosophy on life.
Oh my, Ruthie. My short philosophy on life, I guess, I have a firm belief that if you have your health and a happy marriage, you have just about 90% of what this life has to offer. And I think if you're going to have your health and a happy marriage, you need to have your hand in the hand of the Lord too, because He'll lead you and direct you. Money is important, but money's not everything. And there's a lot more to life than creating a lot of wealth or accumulating a lot of wealth. So.
Well, on behalf of your wonderful father that set the stage for you, and Mr. Hill and Mr. Gifford and all of those that came before you, and how important you have been to Grand Prairie, to its growth, to its wonderful tax base. You contribute a lot to our tax base. We want to thank you for being such a good, productive citizen and a good, productive company. And even though you may not live in Grand Prairie, Texas, really the heartbeat of Gifford Hill is here in Grand Prairie, Texas. It's your main
Well,
plant.
that's certainly the truth. And we have many of our employees who live in Grand Prairie. And we like to think that we're a first-class citizen in Grand Prairie.
Really are.
We certainly are. We're a corporate citizen. I might not live in Grand Prairie, but many of our people do. And we appreciate what Grand Prairie does and the way they support us and with services and police protection, fire protection, water and sewer, and the things that we look to a city for.
I want to thank you very much for taking the time this
Thank you,
afternoon
Ruthie. It was my pleasure to be here.
to be with us and to bring us a real in-depth view of Gifford Hill American and its president, Mr. J.W. Bud Porter, and want to thank you for all of that.
Well, thank you.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.